After learning about the larynx in the last module, I set off to determine what happens to the larynx when you produce the sound ah. Here's what I found. During at-rest tidal breathing, our vocal folds are at rest in a V shape and open to allow air to flow in and out of our lungs. When a person takes a large, deep breath of air, the vocal folds open wider than their at-rest V shape. About 50 to 500 milliseconds before someone makes a vocal sound, the two vocal folds close towards each other, and pressurized air can then flow up from our lungs and initiate complex ripple waves in their surface tissue layers. These rippling folds create a chain reaction sound wave, which travels through the vocal tract and radiates away from our lips. The lateral cricoarytenoid muscles rotate the arytenoid cartilages, which so that the tips of their vocal processes adduct the folds. And when your vocal folds do not completely close, voices can be described as breathy, whereas when they do close completely, voices are described as firm and clear. In order to produce a good quality voice, we must be able to bring our vocal folds or cords together along their entire length. The glottis, which is the gap between them, needs to be closed with the correct amount of tension. The ability to close the glottis also protects the airway by preventing foreign objects from falling into the larynx. When someone is unable to adequately adduct or close the vocal folds, they may experience poor voice quality, difficulty projecting their voice, as well as vocal fatigue. Gross opening of the vocal folds is called vocal fold abduction. When speech stops, elastic recoil helps bring the vocal folds back towards their at-rest open location to permit easily inhalation. When saying ah, the posterior cricoarytenoid muscles contract to produce a wider separation of the vocal folds. Two pairs of internal laryngeal muscles are the primary adductors. Vocal folds in the larynx vibrate when air is forced through them, which creates a buzzing sound. When the vocal folds are slightly stretched, tension increases, which results in a high-pitched sound. On the other hand, lower-pitched sounds are produced when the folds are slightly shorter and less tense. The vocal tract, which includes the throat and mouth, shapes these sounds into vowels and consonants, which make up speech. Some of our external larynx muscles have the ability to move our entire larynx up and down, almost like an elevator. When we speak, the larynx raises the floor of the vocal tract, which causes it to become shorter and narrow at the base, and downward movement of the larynx lowers the floor of the vocal tract, which makes it longer and also changes the quality of the voice. In order to initiate the vocal sound ah, the vocal folds must achieve a degree of adduction, and subglottic air pressure must be high enough to create an airflow force. Waves, known as the mucosal waves of the vocal folds, are initiated and sustained by the myoelastic aerodynamic theory of vocal fold vibration. Myo refers to muscle, elastic refers to the elastic properties of the vocal fold tissues, and aerodynamic refers to the airflow when speaking. This theory occurs when the vocal fold surfaces are sufficiently compliant and elastic, and the vocal folds are adducted enough to create a narrow glottis, and the pressure-induced airflow is also great enough. Positive air pressure from the lungs forces them to open momentarily, but the high-velocity air produces a lowered pressure by the Bernoulli effect, which is negative pressure, and brings them back together. The folds themselves have a resonant frequency which determines voice pitch. Once the pressure builds up high enough, the folds are blown outwards, thus opening the glottis and releasing a single puff of air. Lateral movements of the folds continue until the natural elasticity of the tissue takes over and the vocal folds move back to their original closed position, and then the cycle repeats. Each cycle produces a single, small puff of air, and our voices are nothing other than tens of hundreds of small puffs being released and filtered by the vocal tract. So it's safe to say that the larynx is truly amazing.